Okay guys, so today we are going to move on from solving for missing side lengths using Pythagorean theorem into using it as a converse, okay? So remember our formula is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we're still going to be using that today. Instead of solving for a missing side, whether it's a, b, or c, we are going to have all three sides given to us, and we wanted to determine if all of those sides make a right triangle. So a converse of a statement switches the order of the if and then in the statement. We want to try to write the converse of each of these following statements just as an example so you understand what a converse means. The first statement says, if a triangle has three equal sides, then it is equilateral. So we're just going to flip that around and say, if a triangle is equilateral, then it has three equal sides. So we basically wrote the same type of statement, we just flipped it around. On the next one it says if a number is even, then it is divisible by 2. So we could say if a number is divisible by 2, then it is even. So remember that we know so far that if a triangle is a right triangle, always right, then we know that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That rule will check out. If it's a right triangle, we know a squared plus b squared will equal c squared. So we can just rewrite that statement and say if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then it is a right triangle. Okay, the converse can help us prove whether or not triangles are right triangles. We're always looking for right triangles. Okay, so we're just going to use the formula and we're going to plug in the numbers that they give us, and then if the numbers equal each other, if the rule checks out, then it's a right triangle. If it doesn't, then we know that it's not a right triangle. Okay, so if you need to pause the video, go ahead so you can get all of this down. This is your notes for the day, and then we can move on to number 1. All right, so what we want to determine first is which ones are C. Well, we know that C is always the longest side or the biggest number. So we're just going to assume that the biggest number every time we see it is going to be C. So I'm going to circle it, and we know that 85 is C. Not necessarily because this is a right angle and across from it is the hypotenuse or C, because we don't really know if this is a right angle or not. It could be kind of deceiving. So we want to just take the longest number and pretend that that's C. So remember the formula is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we could say that 84 is A, 13 is B, and then 85 is C. It really doesn't matter between A or B. We can switch those around, but I'll just write those as this for now. So I'm going to plug them in. Say 84 squared plus 13 squared will equal 85 squared. And then the way that we can figure this out in our calculator is pretty simple. We don't have to use y equals. We can just go to our calculator, go to the home screen, and I'm going to type in this first part, 84 squared plus 13 squared. So 84 squared plus 13 squared, and I'm going to press enter. And we see that that value is 7,225. And now I want to figure out, well, what is 85 squared? I'm going to press enter. That is also 7,225. So if those two numbers equal each other, you give it a check and you could say, yes, it is a right triangle. I'm just going to draw a triangle. Because those two numbers are equal to each other, this rule does check out. So we know that a squared plus b squared does equal c squared. So it is a right triangle. So make sure you get all of this down, and we're going to move on to number 2. So my largest number, it looks like to be 21. I'm going to circle it and label that C. And that means I could just use 15 as A and 12 as B. That'll be fine. And I want to plug those into my formula. So a squared would be 15 squared, plus my b squared would be 12 squared, and that will equal c squared, which is 21 squared. And I'm just going to go to my calculator and start figuring it out. So remember, we don't want to plug the whole thing in because really you can't do an equal sign equals 21 squared. So you're always just going to do a squared plus b squared first, find the answer, and then do c squared. So first we're going to do 15 squared plus 12 squared and press enter. And we have 369. And then I want to find out what is 21 squared. And we have 441. So we have a problem. If these two numbers are not equaling each other, then this is not a right triangle. And remember, it's not a right triangle because these two numbers do not equal one another. So the rule doesn't check out, so these cannot be the right lengths of a right triangle if it was. So I'm going to have y'all go ahead and do number 3 and 4 on your own. You will turn these notes in today to me as a participation grade. So once you're done with 1 and 2 with me, move on to 3 and 4, and then flip over to the back and we'll get started on the second part. Alright, so sometimes they don't give you a drawing, they just give you 3 numbers and you have to figure out is that a right triangle or not. So remember, it's always, always, always the longest side is going to be your C. So I'm just going to look at these numbers and say that 36 is my largest, so I'm going to say that's C. And the others could be A and B. So I'm going to skip this part real quick because that'll be our answer. I'm going to move to the proof. So proof just means where you show your work and you're going to prove your answer. So I'm going to plug in to a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I'm going to plug in my values. So I have 12 squared plus 24 squared equals 36 squared. And I'm going to solve it the same exact way. So I'm going to look for 12 squared plus 24 squared. I don't want to do equal. I want to wait and do that second. I'm just doing these two first. So we have 12 squared plus 24 squared and press enter. So I get 720. So that's for the first section. That was for these two. I'm going to move on to 36 squared. So I'm going to type that in, press enter, and I get 1296. So I can see that these two do not equal each other. So is this a right triangle? I would write no. And this is pretty easy, so I want y'all to go through. I'll help you figure out your C's first, and then you're going to finish these on your own and move on to the next section. So we can see right here the largest number is 16, so that's my C. That makes 9A and 11B. If you look here, my largest number is 29. That's my C, so I can make this A and this B. And then looking here at these values, even though they're decimals, it's a little hard to see, but you can see that 12.5 is the largest number. So that's C, A, and B. So I want you to go through and finish these 3, show your work here, and then write yes or no if it's a right triangle or not. And remember, if it's not equal to each other, it's no, and if the numbers do equal, you'll write yes. So pause the video, finish these 3 problems, and then move on to the next section. Alright, so we're going to move on to number 6. It says, Jimmy thinks a window frame in his house looks slanted because the corner doesn't appear to be a 90-degree angle. His wife thinks it looks just fine. They measured the window to check and found the width to be 25 inches and the height to be 36 inches. And the diagonal distance, that's very important when it says diagonal distance, is 45 inches. Okay, so I'm going to draw this and then we can kind of go from there. So we have a window. It doesn't have to be huge. So it says that the width is 25, the height is 36, and the diagonal distance is 45. So first we want to figure out, okay, is this a right triangle or not? And then they want to know who is correct. Who is going to be correct? So we know that the longest number, the biggest number is 45, so that's going to be my C. So it's going to look a little bit like 25 squared plus 36 squared equals 45 squared. So we're going to go ahead and solve that. I want to type it in 25 squared plus 36 squared. Always those first 2 numbers solve that first. So that's 1921 equals, we want to find out 45 squared. That's 2025. So we can see that these numbers do not equal each other. That little line in between the equal sign says not equal. That's what that means. But they want to know who was correct. So Jimmy thinks the window frame in his house looks slanted because the corner doesn't appear to be a 90-degree angle. His wife thinks it looks just fine. So we realize it's not a right triangle or right degree angle, so we're going to say that Jimmy is correct. All right, I think y'all can do Patty on your own. So you can pause the video, do number 7 on your own, and then we'll move on to number 8. All right, so number 8. The perimeters of 3 squares are shown below. Could the 3 squares be positioned so they meet to form a right triangle? Why or why not? So really, we just want to know, okay, first, what are the side lengths? Because remember, we have a right triangle. You don't have to draw this, but I'm just going to draw it for a reference. So remember this figure. So they're saying that these two will add up to this section. Remember the little water video? These two turned and they filled up the water to fill that one up. We want to figure out what are the side lengths first, and then do they make a right triangle? Well, remember, perimeter means you add up all the sides, okay? But they gave us the perimeter. So a way for us to undo that, we can divide those perimeters by 4 because there's 4 sides to a square. So we can just do 48 divided by 4, 140 divided by 4, and 148 divided by 4. So we're going to do those real quick and figure out the side lengths of each of those. So 48 divided by 4 is 12. So we could say that this piece is the smallest one, is 12. We can do 140 divided by 4, and that's 35. So we could say this part of the triangle is 35 feet tall. And then 148 divided by 4. So we can see the hypotenuse is going to be about 37. So I'm not done. They want to know, do they meet to form a right triangle? So we're going to go ahead and solve this and see if the numbers equal each other. So I know that this is my C. So it's going to be 12 squared plus 35 squared equals 37 squared. And let's go ahead and solve it. Remember, always do the first two by themselves. And that's 1369. And then do the second part by itself. So 37 squared. And that is also 1369. So we can put little check marks and say they want to know, could they be positioned to meet or form a right triangle? You could say yes. And we know it's because these two numbers equal each other. A squared plus B squared does equal C squared. So we're good to go. So what I want y'all to do is go ahead and get started on homework number 2, the worksheet, and then you can do the quiz along with it to help you solve all the answers. And whenever you have a question, just raise your hand and let me know. Thanks.